Good evening and welcome to this Tuesday, October 16th, 2018 meeting of the Raymore Planning and Zoning Commission. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Let me remind commissioners, please speak into the microphone for the record and make sure your mic is lighted green. And we'll call roll. Commissioner Wiggins.
Present.
Commissioner Armstrong.
Present.
Commissioner Bowie. Commissioner Crane. Commissioner Fizer.
Present.
Commissioner Meiske.
Present.
Commissioner Urquilla.
Present.
Mayor Turnbow.
Present.
And Commissioner Faulkner is present. We do have a quorum this evening. No items scheduled this evening under personal appearances. 2 items on our consent agenda, and Mr. Zur, if you would make sure that we're doing this right. There are noted in front of you all, I think, a minor correction to a name spelling in the minutes. So can we just accept the consent agenda, or do we need to take a separate vote on A and B and accept minutes as presented? What's your advice?
Can we make a motion to approve the minutes with the suggested corrections as noted?
Oh, yeah.
Then I will go ahead and make a motion to approve the minutes as presented with the corrections noted.
Second.
Okay, let me catch a. So, motion by Commissioner Urquilla, second by Commissioner Wiggins to accept the minutes with correction as noted. All those in favor raise a hand, please. 1, 2, 3, 4. 7 in favor, none opposed, no abstentions. And the second item on the consent agenda, case 18020, the Lofts at Fox Ridge final plat. And again, that motion is on consent agenda, so unless any of the commissioners have an issue with that, I'd entertain a motion to accept case 18020, Lofts at Fox Ridge final plat. And I don't know if that needs any more words or not. Mr. Zur, are you still keeping an eye on me? We're good?
I'll be lazy and so moved.
Okay.
Second.
All right. And again, motion by Commissioner Urquilla, second by Commissioner Wiggins to accept case 18020, Lofts at Fox Ridge final plat as presented. All those in favor raise a hand, please. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, was it 6, 7? Okay, thank you. And that vote is also 7 in favor, none opposed, no abstentions. Okay. Thank you. Catch up with myself. All right. Nothing this evening under unfinished business. So that takes us to new business, case 18016, reclassification of zoning of 136.38 acres located south of North Cass Parkway, east of Interstate 49, from Business Park BP to Planned Unit Development District PUD. Case will require a public hearing, and let's see, would the applicant like to come forward and present your case?
Before we get started, I'm going to broadcast a short presentation to your screen, so I just want to make sure that you can see it
Sure.
before the applicant gets started.
Okay.
Are you able to see the presentation on your screen?
Looks like it's coming up.
Perfect.
Thanks.
Good evening. My name is Grant Harrison with Van Trust Real Estate. We are the applicant and hopeful developer of the property we'll be discussing tonight. We have a quick presentation, then we'll open up to any questions, and hopefully we can address any comments or thoughts you all have. As mentioned, we're a local developer in Kansas City. We would be, again, hopefully the developer and future owner of these projects. We have selected Olson for our civil engineer, who Brett Lordson is here tonight as well, and then Alliance Architecture, who's out of Dallas, who is helping us at this point in the project. We're based out of Kansas City, but have an office in Dallas, Texas, Phoenix, Jacksonville, and Columbus, Ohio. We were formed in 2010. Have about 50 people total. We build for the Van Tuyl family. We've done about $2 billion worth of construction and projects to date. Typically have about $1 billion under process. We love industrial, love office, love multifamily, do a little mixed use, but done about 16 million square feet of industrial to date. And that's why we're here tonight, to see you all. The next 4 pages are just some examples of projects we've completed or are actively under development. This ranges from a 100,000 square foot warehouse to a 900,000 square foot warehouse with 3 interior levels. So a little bit of everything across the country. As you all know, this is located at the southeast corner of North Cass Parkway and 49. The current zoning is BP, which would work for our uses. The reason we're here tonight to rezone is because the property got larger and we realigned Dean Avenue. The PUD we're requesting will give us a flexibility and nimbleness to kind of react to the market. It's going to set the stage for the design and kind of overall square footage, but we'll be able to work within the parameters of our layout to change the building size and orientation. But with our PUD and MOU, we'll kind of know the rules of engagement and be able to react much quicker to the market as it is ever changing. Again, just a quick aerial. I know you're very familiar with the property. It's about 136 acres total. The plans I'll show you are in 3 phases, so 3 different buildings. That plan shows about 1.9 million square feet. This will be light industrial, distribution, cold storage, warehouse, and could be a little bit of everything. These will be very flexible buildings, and again, be able to accommodate a lot of different folks. This is the overall plan, which is reflecting your left side of the screen, a 500,000 square foot building, a 370, and then a million. We would extend Dean Avenue from North Cass south in combination with these phases, so we'd extend it as needed for the first building and so on over time. All 3 of these buildings are cross-docked facilities. These are modern warehouses. There'd be service or docks on both sides, office entries on all 4 corners, and potentially down the middle of the building. So again, these could be carved up into different size tenants fairly easily. Zooming in on the first 2 buildings, we've worked with staff and we'll be addressing screening via landscaping and the setbacks, but heavy landscaping along Dean. We'll try to screen the trailers and the service areas, both on this plan, the north and south ends of the buildings. This is zoomed in on the larger building, the far south end of the property. Again, a very large building, but this is one trying to a proof of concept, so we could react to the market. This overall plan gives us a little bit of everything, so the 500, the 370, and the million. These color plans give you a little better idea, a little easier to see, but this is that first phase we just covered. Second is another iteration of this plan that could be 4 smaller buildings, which as of today we probably think is more market as it stands. And then a third option would be 2 larger buildings, again, all working within our 136 acres and the alignment of Dean. So what we're trying to show is, again, flexibility to see how this thing could all work, subject to how the market reacts. We don't have a set timeline on starting construction yet. We'd like to get going next spring on grading and earthwork, kind of get it ready to go. We're not committed necessarily going vertical, and again, would like to use this mousetrap to attract the best group before doing that. The next couple images are the proposed renderings. Again, there'll be office entries, nice glass features, canopies on the corners. These will be either poured in place tilt construction, all concrete, or precast concrete poured off site. But they'll have glass, metal canopies, metal framing, and then all concrete. Textured paint will go on top of the concrete, and then there'd be a color scheme. It's kind of what's represented in front of you on the board, but as an example. Kind of another shot. These would be the kind of the northern buildings, the east and west facades, and this would be the north and south facade of the large million is the view we're looking at. But all similar feel and concept. This is just an elevation of the first building. This is reflecting a full build out of dock doors, so obviously there's quite a few, but you can see the corners are wrapped with glass, and then kind of shows you there's clear stories above to hopefully try to break up that facade to some degree with the vertical paint scheme, but this would be the service sides of the buildings. That is really the high level points of our project. Would love to dive into more, and I'm sure there's a lot of questions, but I'll kind of turn it over to you now.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Harrison. We have a tendency to run applicants back and forth to the podium, but before we let you sit for the minute, do any of the commissioners have any questions about the presentation? Okay, well, we'll take our chances. Thank you, sir. Okay, Mr. Gress, if you would, give us the staff report on case 18016, please.
Yes, sir. Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Harrison, for a great presentation. As the applicant mentioned, the first case from the agenda this evening is the requested rezoning of the property that we are talking about here this evening from the existing BP Business Park zoning designation to a PUD planned unit development classification. And as we talked about, the property is located generally at the southeast corner of I-49 and North Cass Parkway interchange. The growth management plan actually identifies this area as appropriate for commercial development. The major thoroughfare plan map contained in that plan identifies both North Cass Parkway and Dean Avenue as minor arterial roadways. Because this evening does require a public hearing, tonight's meeting was advertised in the September 27th edition of the Journal. And items of record for the evening are the mailed notices to the adjoining property owners, the notice of publication in the Journal, the Unified Development Code, the application itself, the growth management plan, the staff report, the applicant's conceptual site plan, and the draft MOU for the proposed PUD zoning classification. Staff has outlined the requirements for a zoning map amendment for y'all's consideration. And looking at some of the previous actions on the property and kind of how we got to the existing zoning designation today, the MOU and master land use plan for the Good Ranch was approved by the city of Raymore on March 16th of 1994, so some time ago, and the subject property, which is identified as Tract 10, was identified as appropriate for a business park and industrial type development. The property was rezoned from agricultural land to the BP Business Park designation on March 23rd of 2014. And because this was a rezoning, it did also require a good neighbor meeting, which was held on August 28th of this year at Centerview. 18 residents attended the meeting in addition to city staff and members from the project team. And the questions and answers that you find in the packet give a good summary of the discussion that we had at that meeting. We had a lot of good questions that were asked, and I think a lot of good answers that were followed up with those as well. Looking at some of the staff comments, as I kind of touched on, the MOU and the master land use plan for the overall Good Ranch, which was approved back in 1994, identified this exact tract for essentially this exact same type of development that we're talking about this evening. That area sat, pretty quiet down there for a while, and so we're excited to see someone attracted to that area today. The existing and proposed development standards as they, under the BP, the existing zoning designation and the proposed PUD are generally the same. The applicant has requested one modification to the development standards, that being the front yard setback. Under the BP zoning designation, it requires a 30-foot front yard setback. Under the PUD, they've requested a 20-foot front yard setback. And while their site plan doesn't show anything getting nearly 20 foot from the front yard, as the applicant mentioned, they've kind of put that in there for some flexibility, depending on the type of applicant or tenants that they might attract in the future. the overall site plan itself that we'll talk about here in just a little bit is totally in compliance with all of the standards of the BP zoning district that exists today, with the exception of the parking standards for the types of uses that we're here to talk about. For the office space, manufacturing, production, industrial service, trucking or freight terminal, warehousing, and wholesaling generally require 1 parking space per 1,000 square feet. Based on the applicant's research, and I'm sure some of the projects that they've done, over the country, they're requesting a slight modification at 1 space per 1,300 square feet. So, if the commission decides to approve the rezoning tonight, this will become the standard for the PUD development as they move forward. And as I mentioned, the site plan that we'll discuss here after this case does comply with all of the other standards that would apply under the existing zoning district. As I mentioned, the front yard setback and the parking are the only 2 modifications that they've requested to change. The reclassification to a PUD does require an MOU to be prepared that outlines the expectations from the applicant, the property owner, regarding what's expected of the project and who's responsible for what aspects of the project. That draft has been included in your packet this evening for your review, and we're happy to answer any questions that you might have on that. Should the commission approve tonight's item, it will go on to City Council for their consideration and final approval later this month. And kind of touching on the overall purpose and the intention of rezoning from the existing business park classification, which, as I mentioned, meets the exact intent of what they're looking to do with this property. What they're getting at, and kind of what the applicant kind of touched on, is the flexibility, the overall flexibility of the site and how it's developed. With these large buildings and the overall large size of the site, comes a little bit of change and some flexibility that they needed built in order to attract the best tenants that they can attract to the site. In addition to that, the overall alignment of Dean is generally the same, but in order to accommodate their site, they have realigned it slightly, which would have required a rezoning to make the entire site consistent because of the realignment of Dean Avenue, shifted the property lines of the zoning districts that are currently in that area. So those are the major reasons behind asking to seek that change in zoning designation. The overall flexibility allows them, some flexibility in the placement of the buildings on the site, the phasing. You might get an applicant who might need a 500,000 square foot building to be the first, down there on the site, but you also might have one that might need an 850,000 square foot building. So that flexibility is really key in making this project success for the applicant. And as I mentioned, the zoning and land use of the subject property remains consistent with the land use that was identified in the Good Ranch Master Plan that has been in place since 1994. Dean Avenue and North Gas Parkway and Hewok Hill Road have all been designed and constructed to handle the exact same type of traffic and volume of traffic that would be generated by this type of development. They're all classified as either a minor arterial as you go north on Dean Avenue and even east to west on Hewok Hill Road. The property owner is currently completing a geomorphic assessment of the stream corridor that's the ultimate collection point of all the stormwater that will be generated on this site as it travels south. That assessment will help identify what sort of interventions and BMPs might be necessary to address any impacts that this development might have on the property. That study will be required to be completed before the actual MOU can be approved. That's currently underway right now, but it wasn't ready to be presented at this time for the meeting this evening. And in addition, there is no floodplain that currently touches the property, so that won't be an issue as the applicant continues to move forward. Staff did submit proposed findings of fact for your consideration and your decision, but overall, should the commission decide to recommend approval of this application, it would move forward to City Council for first reading on October 22nd, and November 2nd would be November 12th would be the second reading at City Council. Overall, staff does recommend approval of case 18016, the reclassification of 136 acres from BP, the Business Park Zoning District, to a PUD as presented to the City Council with a recommendation of approval. And the last page of your package, which has some great information that is particularly helpful for this application itself, but also the site plan, would be the memo from the Engineering and Public Works Department, which goes into some greater detail that I kind of talked about on the design of Hewok Hill Road, North Gas Parkway interchange overall, and kind of explains how that will be impacted by any traffic that would be generated by this development and how it might be handled throughout that entire interchange. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. I know Mr. Rokos is here as well for any questions that you might have, and I'm sure the applicant might have some answers to questions that you would have as well. And that would conclude staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Gress. Before we go on to the public hearing, if I may, I'll ask you one quick question about parking. So you noted in staff report that the PUD would allow a reduction from 1 parking space per 1,000 square feet of non-office plus whatever to 1 per 1,300. And what I'm not quite clear on or don't remember, as I look at, I happen to be on page 65 of the packet, and you may or may not remember, but this is a fairly detailed layout of the property, including the buildings and the parking spaces. So what I believe I see is that the parking spaces on either side of the building where the docks are actually look to be quite a bit longer, bigger. I'm assuming those are parking spaces for trailers. And then the parking spaces at like well, I think the directions here are not true north and south, but at the narrow end of lot 1, for instance, building 1, those parking spaces appear to be conventional automobile sized. So when we count the number of parking spaces per square feet, are we including the trailer parking or just the automobile parking?
It would just be the vehicle parking for passenger vehicles. It does not take into account the truck parking or trailer parking on site.
They're separate.
Yes.
And over and above.
Yes.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate that. Any more questions for staff before we go on to the public hearing? Okay.
Mr. Chair, I did have a question for Mr. Gress. In your statement there toward the end, you talked about the building of North Cass Parkway, Hubach Hill Road as being able to handle that kind of traffic. I might challenge you a little bit as it goes further east. I know that we do have the 3 lanes similar to Lucy Webb to a point, but then it gets to a point where it narrows down back to 2 lanes. And then even when you get to School Road, the county has posted signs, no truck traffic on Hubach Hill Road. So I'm curious as to how we might be able to negotiate traffic once that's going. How, you know, if a truck gets past that location, how do we get that guy back? I mean, is there a facilitation for that so that we can ensure the safety of the rest of the motoring public as that large vehicle comes back toward the warehouse?
Very good question. That was actually brought up a pretty heavy topic at our Good Neighbor meeting that we had for this project. And in talking with the applicant themselves and our engineering department, there really isn't a whole lot of reason for trucks and people that are visiting this site. As they're coming out of this property, there's nothing to the east that would really attract them to make a right turn as you come out of the site down Hubach Hill. Right. Should they do that by accident, the last thing we want is for them to, go through a residential subdivision and drive their truck through there. So there is certainly talks, a city staff of a signage plan to direct trucks to the correct route out of the site. Dean Avenue was designed as a 4-lane road to handle the truck traffic going north should a truck ever find themselves going to a warehouse or something up north. But as they go further east, like I said, there's, certainly as it narrows down to 2 lanes, that's just not a very logical or a comfortable route to go, I'm sure, for a truck driver. And so the most logical route out of the site would be either directly to the west to I-49 or north up Dean Avenue. But we can
I'm thinking of a new driver coming off the highway to the site and missing the turn.
Sure.
That's what I'm concerned about, and
sure.
Getting into the residential area and having a hard time negotiating getting back to the appropriate site. So that I was just I'm glad to hear that you guys had talked about that, and potential signage might help a lot with that.
Right.
But Dean is going to align to a certain extent right there, and they're either going to go left or right. But if they pass that, they're kind of in a bind at that point.
Yeah, after you get past Dean Avenue, there aren't a whole lot of options to turn around safely. And so, as I mentioned, there's a number of things that we could work on. Being a public road, I'm not sure what aspect we have to completely eliminate the truck traffic, but there's certainly something we can do to help direct them to the correct location.
Yes. Yes, sir.
Yeah, Mr. Zur?
Yeah, if I could real quickly just step in on that one. We recently passed an ordinance with regard to construction traffic over in one of our residential neighborhoods. It may be an option for us to be able to consider moving forward with that one as well, too.
Be awesome. Thank you. All right, and then, of course, that intersection, will there be any future plans by the city for control of that intersection?
Eventually, there will be plans for some sort of traffic control there. It's unsure what or when that will take place. The city is currently pursuing a traffic study that will better help us understand when and what that will actually look like and the best way to coordinate traffic throughout the entire interchange as this site hopefully continues to build out and we start seeing more commercial and residential traffic build out in the area. That study has yet to be started. We're still working with the firm on getting the background information and getting the framework of that study completed. But once that study is done, and Mr. Rokas can certainly add to this, that's really intended to not really directly impact this project specifically, but the entire Good Ranch and the overall area overall, kind of direct traffic through the area.
Thank you, David.
Yep. Commissioner Kia, question for staff?
Yeah, so you mentioned Dean Avenue, and we know it is capable, to your point, it's 4 lanes wide until you get to Lucy Webb. I have a trouble in my little Prius navigating that roundabout. How is a semi going to, is it built to handle a semi going through that roundabout, or are we going to change that intersection to make it easier for them to go straight on through up to 58, as opposed to then having to try to turn left and take that wonderful curve that is the outer road north to 58?
Great question. So as you mentioned, you're very familiar with that roundabout. So you're familiar with the rocks that are placed in the middle of that, and that was done intentionally. The roundabout itself is designed to handle truck traffic and a semi-truck trailer at a certain speed. Now, whether or not the trucks choose to follow that speed limit is another story. But the reasoning behind those rocks is that if a truck can't make that tight turn around that roundabout, they're not cutting up the grass or tearing up a monument that might be there. They're simply driving over the rocks that can be pushed right back into the middle. So that roundabout was designed to handle truck traffic and trucks going north and south on Dean at a certain speed limit. And so certainly if that becomes an issue at some time in the future, there's something we can do to look and try and enforce that a little bit better.
Right. Mr. Grass, am I correct that truck traffic might include a fire truck on occasion?
You are correct.
Yeah. Thought I remembered that. Okay. Any more questions for staff before we open the public hearing? All right. Before I open the public hearing on case 18016, Raymore Industrial Development rezoning from business park to planned unit development, let me ask, if you wish to speak on this case, come forward to the podium. Please give us your name and address for the record, and not potentially too much public this evening, but we'd ask that you limit your comments to no more than 5 minutes just to keep the proceedings moving. And with that said, I'll open the public hearing on case 18016, Raymore Industrial Development rezoning. Would anyone like to speak on this case? Okay, and seeing none, the one time I get to whap the gavel, I'll close the public hearing and open the floor for discussion by the commission. Mr. Grass, I'll slip in one more question for you. And Mr. Zur, I want to stay on track here on just the rezoning since that's the case at hand. So I believe the MOU is an integral part of the rezoning to PUD, correct? The fact of the MOU. Okay, so I'm not quite sure who best to answer it, but on page 5 of the MOU, preliminary development plan, section 2, zoning and land use, section B, land use, lower level number 1A, waste related use. And I think if I read the paragraph above, it says, except for the uses listed below, uses designated as permitted in BP and M1 industrial districts shall be permitted on all lots subject to compliance with any special conditions. And then it's listing under A, waste-related use. So that, to me, would fall into the except for the uses listed below. What I just wanted to understand was, does that then prohibit any waste-related use on this development?
I'm happy to take that one, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr.
Yes, the answer is waste-related uses would not be allowed anywhere within this portion of the development, so you would not be seeing transfer stations or other salvage or other types of entities going on at any of these locations. It is accepted from the uses that are allowed. So it may have been allowed under the M1 industrial districts.
Right.
It will not be allowed pursuant to the terms of the MOU, which is one of the advantages of the MOU for the city's perspective in being able to control what goes into those locations.
Okay, so one further question, and I really don't remember this, but how do we consider recycling? Is recycling considered a waste-related use?
I think it would depend on the materials, the types of materials that they are recycling. If it's,
Okay.
Cardboard or something that doesn't, or phones or something similar to Commissioner Wiggins, that certainly could be allowed. But if it's a food recycling that would produce a lot of noise or odors, it certainly would not be permitted.
So our understanding would be clean waste, if there's...
And in such case, it would likely be subject to the next section under a conditional use, which would require a little bit further review by staff and the commission.
Yeah, okay. I'm a little more sensitized to recycling at the moment, because what I understand from reading about MARC and so forth is that there are actually some recycling centers closing, not being immediately replaced. I guess the market for recycled or recyclable material in China is down, and so I'm actually kind of concerned in the long term that we protect the ability to recycle. Mr. Zur.
And I would simply note you do have a definition under Chapter 485 with regard to recycling facilities. I would anticipate that none of these would fall within the uses that are, I would anticipate that most of these are going to be identifiable as waste-related uses, but it would be any business that engages in the collection, storage, or processing of any type of aluminum, glass, paper, plastic, rubber, textile, landscape waste, or other similar materials for the purposes of marketing the material for use in manufacturing process of new, reused, or reconstituted products. So you do have language in there with regard to recycling facility, which lists out the types of potential recycling you'd have.
So in your interpretation, that would be permitted per the MOU as not being, quote, waste-related, unquote?
I would have to check also the definition with regard to waste, so allow me to do that.
Okay, please.
If I could interrupt, Mr. Chair, within our use table that we have in the UDC, under the overall overarching category of waste-related use, you have your junkyard, recycling facility, or a sanitary landfill. I believe because all of those fall under the category of a waste-related use, all three of those would be prohibited within this development.
Okay.
Mr. Gress is simply faster than I am.
Okay. All right, and just for the record, what page are we on?
For the UDC, sir?
Yes, please.
Be page 410-4.
Gotcha. Thank you. Appreciate it. Okay, that's enough on that. Other commissioners, questions, comments?
I will go ahead, hearing no other comments, and make a motion that the Planning and Zoning Commission accept the staff proposed findings of fact in forward case number 18016, the reclassification of zoning of 136.38 acres located on the southeast corner of North Cass Parkway and Interstate 49 interchange from BP, which is a business park district, to a PUD or planned unit development district, to the City Council with the recommendation of approval.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Commissioner Kia. Do I hear a second? All right, Commissioner Meiske, go ahead. I guess that was all. I guess that was all we needed for a second. Okay, let's see if I can rephrase this halfway well. Motion by Commissioner Kia, second by Commissioner Meiske on case 18016, rezoning of 136.38 acres, business park to planned unit development, Raymore Industrial Development, to accept staff proposed findings of fact and forward the case to City Council with a recommendation of approval. Is there any discussion on the motion? All those in favor, raise a hand, please. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 in favor. None opposed, no abstentions. Thank you. Commissioner Kia, you're keeping this moving right along. And we'll go to our next related case, case 18017, the Raymore Industrial Development Site Plan. And if the applicant would like to come forward to the podium again and present this case, that would be great.
I might have mixed the two presentations, but that one I gave was the same one, so.
Okay, that's fine too. Just didn't want you to think we were ignoring you.
No, not at all. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Harrison. Mr. Grass, would you give us the staff report on case 18017, please?
Yes, sir. Thank you. So again, we're talking about the exact same location here, the southeast corner of the I-49 corridor and North Cass Parkway. I've included in this section of your packet some nice aerial shots of what the site currently looks like. As you can see, looking from both the southern portion of the site as you get towards 195th Street, as well as views looking from the Stonegate subdivision and the North Cass Parkway and Dean intersection. So you can get a good idea of what the site looks like overall and start to envision how hopefully it'll be developed here in the near future. The applicant is requesting site plan approval for their generally 1.9 million square foot industrial development overall. The uses in this area are generally undeveloped with some residential uses in a distance to the northeast of the site in the Stonegate subdivision. As I mentioned, the growth management plan does identify this area as appropriate for commercial development, and the major thoroughfare plan classifies North Cass Parkway and Dean Avenue as minor arterial roadways. City ordinance does not require advertisement for site plans, nor do they require public hearings, so tonight's meeting for this application was not published in the newspaper. Staff has submitted outlined the requirements for site plan approval for your consideration. And looking again at the previous actions on the property, just touching base on the overall history. As I mentioned, the overall land use plan for this property, which envisioned this exact same type of development, was approved back in 1994, and the property got its existing zoning in the March of 2014. And as you just heard, the applicant is requesting to slightly modify that for some flexibility on their site. The engineering division did review this application and offered their comments in your packet. I would suggest they do have some very great explanations on the overall layout of the site and how it will work in the future. It kind of speaks to the points of the traffic study that I mentioned previously. So again, if you have any questions on that and how that will kind of play out in the future, I would encourage you to ask any questions either of myself or Mr. Rokos, and we'd be happy to answer them for you. The development standards, as I mentioned before, under the current zoning district classification, as well as the proposed, the site plan does meet all of the requirements with regards, with the exception of the parking. However, because the commission did recommend approval of that, the city council will hear that here later this month. And should that be approved, the development standards that they proposed as part of the PUD will be finalized as the overall development standards for this development. There are no use-specific standards or conditions per the UDC for this type of development. However, as we just got into a little bit of the MOU, there are some special conditions that could be placed on a couple of the uses in the future, should they, depending on the type of applicant that the project might attract. The parking for the site, as I mentioned before, the applicant is requesting a standard of 1 space per 1,300 square feet, which is shown on the site plan for you this evening. As far as landscaping, a requirement for 20% of the site is required to be reserved for a landscaped area. A total of 35% of the project has been provided with landscaping, so it does meet that section of our code. Type C screen is required along the northern property line, along where our future commercial development will occur along North Cass Parkway. So adequate screening has been provided per the landscape plan, which is included in your all's packet. A total of 168 trees and 512 shrubs are required throughout the entirety of the parking lot. A total of 201 trees and 512 shrubs have been provided. No details as to plant location, type, or size have been required as part of this aspect of the project. Those details will come as the applicant moves forward with final plat for each phase of the project. They'll be required to submit specific landscaping plans for each phase of the project. But overall, the proposed landscaping at this point does comply with all aspects of the landscaping requirements for the UDC. With regard to building design standards, the overall site itself does comply with the building design standards, and the applicant did provide a nice overview of the types of materials that they're looking to provide on the exterior of their building. As you mentioned, a mixture of concrete, glass, very nice finishes on the exterior of the buildings. As far as pedestrian access, it has been provided to the site. Sidewalk eventually will be constructed on both sides of Dean Avenue running north and south, and access has been provided from those future sidewalks to both the parking lot areas and the main entrances of all of the buildings on the site. Master signage plan was not submitted with the application because it is not generally approved as part of the site plan process. However, the general locations of where they've talked about signs do comply with those standards, but sign permits will need to be pulled and approved before the installation of any signs can occur on the site in the future. The fire district has been heavily involved in their view of this application, and to date, the applicant has addressed all the concerns that the fire district has had with regards to fire suppression and how the building will be served, and the ability for fire trucks to navigate within and around the site itself. In addition, as you all know, the fire district does require the issuance of a separate building permit in addition to the permit that the city does require, so they'll have another chance to review the more specific building plans when that time comes. Stormwater overall will be collected on site and discharged into 2 separate detention basins. And as I talked about before, the geomorphic study that the applicant is currently pursuing will have some effect on that in terms of when certain types of interventions might be required given the types of buildings that are being proposed and kind of when those are being phased throughout the development. That study will hopefully be wrapped up here within the next couple of months. Site lighting, per the MOU, a site lighting plan was not required to be submitted at this part of the project. In the process, again, they'll be required to submit specific lighting plans at the final plat phase when they move forward with actual building plans themselves, so long as they're compliant with the requirements and specifications of our Unified Development Code. Trash enclosures, and speaking with the applicant and just looking at projects of this size, individual trash receptacles are not generally common throughout sites like this. It's more common that trash is collected at one of the dock doors that a truck might pull directly up to the dock door and collect a dumpster full of trash or cardboard boxes, depending on the use that takes place in the building. However, should any individual trash receptacles be proposed at any time, they will be required to be screened in compliance with the UDC. The screening and mechanical equipment, all the equipment that was shown on the site plan to this at this point in the process has been adequately screened. That requirement is kind of monitored throughout the entire process of the building. The building process is, if anything, utility facilities pop up that need to be screened, our building official is good at catching those in the field and monitoring those requirements as they go throughout the process. Access to the site will generally be served by Dean Avenue and North Cass Parkway, and access directly to the site from Dean Avenue moving south is served by a series of 7 separate access drives serving both truck traffic and vehicle traffic, oftentimes separating out the 2 in separate parking lots as you've seen on the site plan. And as I mentioned before, the traffic study that the city is currently pursuing will help direct some of that traffic south into the site and address some of the signal timing, signal issues that you might see, and kind of help the city better understand when and what those interventions might look like, given the full build out of this site in addition to the commercial ground that exists to the north. So there'll be more on that to come as this project and other projects continue to move forward. Staff did submit proposed findings of fact for your consideration in this application. Because the Planning Commission has final approval over site plans, tonight would be the final decision for this application. And I will just preface, just similar to our last application that we heard, our last meeting with the Lofts at Foxridge, because the applicant is pursuing a rezoning at the same time they're pursuing a site plan, it will be important to condition the approval of the site plan on the approval of the rezoning at the city council level. So the commission would more than likely want to add a 15th condition on the approval of case number 18016, the rezoning of the land from BP to a PUD zoning classification. But overall, staff does recommend approval of the case to City Council with a recommendation of approval, subject to the conditions as presented, in addition to the one that I mentioned to you all. That would conclude staff report. If you have any questions, I'm happy to entertain them.
Thank you, Mr. Grass. Floor is open for discussion by the commission.
I
Any
have a-
questions for staff?
Commissioner Kia, I have a question.
Yes, Commissioner Kia.
You mentioned adding a 15th condition, because condition 1 not cover what you were talking about?
You're obviously better at reading than I am, sir.
Okay. And then
makes
also
sense.
then condition number 11, kind of, so I just want to make sure I'm understanding the recommendation this evening is to kind of generally approve the site plan, knowing that any actual construction or movement would have to come back before us for consideration for approval, correct?
So one thing, that if you will look in your MOU, and I'll find the exact location of that requirement, one of the provisions that the applicant and city staff are requesting, as we've kind of talked about the necessity of flexibility in this type of development for the different types of tenants that the applicant could potentially attract to the site. If you flip to page 8 of the MOU from our previous application, under provision number 2, city staff is requesting the authority to approve any amendment to the master site plan, provided that all the requirements within that amendment comply with the requirements of the Unified Development Code. And that would negate the necessity for the applicant to come back through this process with the expectation that they're operating within the confines of generally what you have all approved tonight. Certainly if they wish to expand the site further to the east or wish to realign Dean Avenue other than what you have approved tonight, anything that significant would more than likely have to come back to the Planning Commission for further review. But minor changes such as building orientation, building size, city staff is requesting authority to approve those without the consent of the Planning and Zoning Commission. However, if you look at condition number 3, any decision that city staff makes does have the ability to be appealed by the Planning and Zoning Commission at any time.
Thank you, I'm good.
Thank you.
Yes, the final plats would have to come back to Planning Commission for final approval.
Okay, perfect, that's what I was trying to understand. Thank you.
Yeah, great. Okay. Other questions?
I'll then go ahead and make a motion.
All right, Commissioner Kia, go ahead.
Thanks. I will motion to approve, or I'm sorry, to accept the staff proposed findings of fact and approve case number 18017, the Raymore Industrial Development Site Plan, subject to the 14 conditions as outlined by the city staff, and approval by the city council.
Give me a second. I don't think city council plays into this. City council doesn't, okay.
They do play into it in needing to approve the PUD,
Yeah.
which is one of the 14 conditions. I just wanted to make sure we
understand.
specified that.
Okay, sorry. Can you restate the motion? I think I got
Sure.
around the axle there.
I am moving that the Planning and Zoning Commission accept the staff proposed finding of facts and approve case number 18017, the Raymore Industrial Development Site Plan,
Right.
subject to the 14 conditions as outlined by the city staff, which does include the necessity of city council's approval of the,
Okay, finally makes
Stated
sense.
change.
Thank you. All right, do I hear a second?
I'll second.
And second by Commissioner Meiske. This would work okay if I didn't insist on trying to restate it, you understand? But so we have a motion on the floor by Commissioner Kia, second by Commissioner Meiske, to accept staff proposed findings of fact and approve case 18017, Raymore Industrial Development Site Plan, subject to the 14 conditions noted, one of which requires city council approval. That work? Okay, thank you. Is there any discussion on the motion? All those in favor, raise a hand, please. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7, bite my tongue. 7 in favor, none opposed, and no abstentions. So, site plan is approved. Thank you all very much. Mr. Grass, thank you. and Mr. Zur. And let's see, that will take us right along to a city council report, Mr. Zur.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I'm happy to provide a city council report this evening for the city council meeting which occurred October 8th, 2018. That was the last regular city council meeting. At that time, the city council had a number of items on new business that would be of interest to this commission, including the zoning reclassification for the lofts at Fox Ridge, which was reviewed and approved by the commission at its last meeting. At that particular meeting, and in fact with the next two items that I'm going to reference, the public hearings were opened and continued at the request of the applicant so they could all go forward at the same time. So the zoning reclassification for the lofts at Fox Ridge, along as with the preliminary plat for the lofts at Fox Ridge, both of those had their kind of continuance with regard to the public hearings at the request of the applicant. The only other item that I'd point out of interest with regard to the council's actions at the October 8th meeting was the adoption of the fiscal year 2019 city budget. Public hearing was opened. There was discussion amongst the council members. The continuation of the public hearing was then voted upon, and then they also completed and approved the first reading of the 2019 fiscal year budget, which sets the groundwork for where we go moving forward as far as the city is concerned. Those are all of the identifiable items that I can see from the October 8th meeting. I'm happy to answer any questions, as I'm sure Mayor Turnbow is as well, if you have any additional follow-up.
Anything to add, Mayor Turnbow?
Jonathan always does a great job.
That's true. All right, Mr. Grass, we'll move on to you and staff report, please.
Thank you, sir. Looking ahead at our upcoming meetings for the November 6th meeting, we've got the Timber Trails third plat. They're looking to finish out that phase north of Meadowlark, just to the west of Dean Avenue. So they're working on getting those revisions in time for that meeting. In addition, we're looking to bring back the 29th Amendment of the UDC, which includes the proposed changes to the sidewalk design. We've had some good discussion among staff with the commission on some of those changes, so we're hoping to bring that back for one final vote and see how we end up with that. In addition to that, we have an application filed for a conditional use permit for a home-based business, Autotopia Detailing, who is requesting to install a sign at the entrance to his driveway, which also serves as the entrance to his business, which is a car detailing business that he operates out of his home. And so we're working on with that property owner to get that application completed and that staff report done. Looking at it November 20th, we currently do not have any applications scheduled for that meeting, but we will wait. The deadline hasn't quite approached yet, so there's a chance that we might have a couple file in between now and then. That would conclude staff report.
Okay, Mr. Rokos.
The major project we've been working on lately is been working up at Hawkridge Park. You haven't been there to see a lot of dirt move and a lot of different things getting built. Stand by over the next few weeks. You'll see a lot of different things happen up there, and it's going to look pretty good. So happy to answer any questions you might have.
We ready for ice skating on the pond yet? Doesn't need an answer.
I had a question. Greg, where are we at on the front entryway? I know that we approved the contract the other night. When is that work going to begin?
The contractor's got to fill out those paperwork, which I don't know if that's been completed yet or not, and then we'll have to hold a pre-construction conference, and then they'll have to order their materials, and there's a lead time on a lot of their materials that they have to order the metal and on the parts to assemble it. So there'll be a lag time until they have that parts, because it's a very short construction window that we're giving them to actually be out there. So they need to make sure they have everything present, and then once they have it, they'll go to work.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll open the floor for public comment. One last opportunity if anyone from the public wishes to speak on any matters related to planning and zoning this evening. And seeing none, I'll open the floor for commission member comment. Commissioner Kia, may I start with you this evening?
Sure. My only comment this evening is, as usual, express appreciation to the city staff for all the hard work you guys put into helping us grow in the way we want to grow, and to kind of especially note the exciting developments that are coming before us here recently. that show that not only there is opportunity for growth here in Raymore, but that there are developers interested in and excited to come to Raymore. And so I know that's as a result of the efforts of the city staff in attracting them to the area. And so I just want to express my appreciation for what you all are doing to help the city grow in a way that I think will benefit the community as a whole.
Thank you. Commissioner Meiske.
I believe this is my last meeting that I will have with you all. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I'm not leaving on any hardships. It's my wife and I have decided that maybe we're going to move out of Raymore. So sorry about that, but you know, plans are still up in the air. And since my term's up, I thought this would be a good time to go. I've seen a lot of good changes. I think I've been here since 2013, maybe early 2013. I can't remember. It's been a long time. When you get old, your mind just goes. You know, with the coming of Mr. Grass, you know, I think that's been an added asset to the city. I mean, he's done a wonderful job, and I've really got to thank Mr. Zur for keeping me in line, because I know we've had we've had discussions. But I think with the leadership that if Chairman Faulkner is going to be here, I mean, I think this place is going to really thrive, and it's been fun. So that's all I had.
Thank you very much, and you will certainly be missed. Okay, now that I'm rattled, Vice Chair Fizer.
Well, I wasn't going to make a comment, but since Commissioner Meiske is leaving, I just want to say I've enjoyed working with you on the commission, and I wish you well, and sorry to see you leaving our town, but, you know. Okay, well, I wish you the best.
Thank you. Commissioner Armstrong.
Well, I'll reiterate that fond farewell. You'll be missed as my benchmate and continue to live the dream.
Mayor Turnbow.
Don, thank you for everything. You've been a great sounding board for this group up here for many years, and your dedication and volunteerism is not unseen. We thank you for everything that you've done and your dedication to this. You make a lot more meetings than some, and probably here more than you want to be. But we really do appreciate your dedication to the city of Raymore. I did use the term volunteer, didn't I? Yeah, okay. Just to introduce him, Mr. Jim Peterman is the proposed member to replace Mr. Meiske on the up here on the dais. He's a member of Ward 2 and lives here in Silver Lakes on the Silver Lake Homeowners Association board, and has been very active in city government over the past year and a half, and will be a welcomed addition. So I wanted to let folks know and introduce Jim. That's why he's here tonight. And again, thank you very much, Don. We appreciate it.
Right. Thank you, Mayor Turnbow. Commissioner Wiggins.
Thank you to city staff for everything you always do. Commissioner Meiske, although I've only been here for a few months, I've appreciated getting to hear your input and everything, and wish you the best wherever it may be, whether it's here in Raymore, hopefully still, but wherever your family takes you. Other than that, I have nothing else. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I'll go last, hopefully not least, but welcome. If I had known you were joining the commission, we could have stretched this meeting out about 3 more hours, but
nope.
Well, yeah, and thank you to Commissioner Arkia. I can see him gritting his teeth over there right at the moment. So in addition to my usual thank you to city staff, and thank you, Mr. Zur, for the loan of the pen at the last meeting. I did have an article. I don't necessarily want to read the entire thing, but I'll try to paraphrase it. And Mr. Grass, if you don't mind, I'll pass this on to you, and I would like you to share it with Mr. Catarat. You all probably saw this. So this was Kansas City Star, Wednesday, October 3rd. Looks like I didn't note the page, but it's talking about Prairie Village, new design standards. And not that I particularly want Raymore to be Prairie Village, because there's a very good reason that I live on Missouri side and live in Raymore in particular. But I think there's still some interest here. Prairie Village City Council approved new regulations aimed at development of large homes within the city. Council members voted 11-2 to adopt a slate of neighborhood design standards, including rules on tree planting, garage sizes, notifying neighbors. And I think, you know, we probably already have things in UDC to address that, certainly the good neighbor meetings. I guess Prairie Village is already at a stage of wanting to tear down Mid-Century Ranch and Cape Cod homes that were the character of the city and rebuild on those lots with much larger homes, which apparently kind of puts off the neighbors as not really fitting in with the neighborhood. And I thought it was interesting because one of these days, Raymore is going to get enough age on it that I think we may see, you know, a different model than what we're seeing today with continued growth and population doubling every 10 years. But I'm not sure, you know, at the very least, we're going to run out of land to develop. And so looking ahead, which we do try to do with our growth management plans and so forth. So it goes into a lot of details. It's requiring street trees, wanting to break up large building walls, things that we already do, height requirements and so forth. And frankly, I'm not even going to say the price here because it's enough that I choke on it, but it's considerably more expensive than the majority of homes in Raymore, which I think is one of the appeals of Raymore as a community for growing businesses like Cerner, perhaps trying to think of the right name, National Security Campus up on 150 Highway at Botts. I think this was an interesting quote, though. We're making a one size, let's see, this was a council member who was one of the no votes and wanted to exempt existing homeowners from having to comply with new guidelines on impervious surfaces and large continuous surfaces. She said, we're making a one-size-fits-all answer for a substantial variety of properties. As I look at the city today, most homes don't comply with what we are describing as the charm of Prairie Village, and the majority of council disagreed. So one of the things I think we've been working toward and will continue to work toward is a diversity of housing options. We've talked about community for all ages, and in very recent times, we've approved a significant number of additional, trying to think what they called them, Class A apartment units and so forth. So I hope we're a little bit ahead of the game, or at least being somewhat far-sighted. But I still thought this was quite a detailed article. Thought I'd share it with you, and hope that wasn't too long. If you're up to it, unless any of the commission have anything to add, I would entertain a motion to adjourn tonight's meeting.
I'll make it my last official.
Please.
And I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Okay.
And I'll second it.
All right, that's fair trade. Motion to adjourn by Commissioner Meiske, second by Commissioner Urquilla. All those in favor, raise a hand, please. And I can count 7. And none opposed, no abstentions. Thank you all very much. And welcome aboard.